Thank you all for joining us this morning. I think this is the 24th in our series of artist professional development workshops, and over the past year, dating back to August, we have featured artists who have been developing projects for the public art program. And as Katie will tell you through this, we've been uploading all of these workshops online as videos, and so they're there as a resource dating back to August. And resource includes artists, but it also includes discussions with attorney Sarah Conley Odenkirk about basic good business practices and guidance on a wide range of legal matters that I think are in every artist's interest. But today we have Dan Mayer, who has made the transition from being a book artist, a printmaker, into public art. And with that, I will turn it over to Barry Sparkman, one of our project managers, to introduce Dan, and then also Katie Bayaris, talk a little bit about the process for posting questions when you have them. And we welcome you today. So thanks so much for joining us. Barry?
Thanks to everyone for joining us this morning, and especially thanks to Dan for sharing information about his recently completed project. In Dan's studio practice, he merges language and art to create experimental artist books and prints, as Ed mentioned, and he works in a variety of media, including traditional analog and digital techniques. He has exhibited his work nationally and internationally, and it is included in many private and public collections, including the Jack Ginsberg Artist Book Collection in Johannesburg, the Getty, Wellesley, Yale, the Hague National Library, the New York Public Library, and the list goes on and on. He's director of Arizona State University's Pyracantha Press, where he publishes interdisciplinary, limited edition, handmade books and prints that are created in collaboration with artists, writers, and musicians. The press's works are included in more than 100 national and international collections. The press also houses several archives that are used for study and research. Dan facilitated the acquisition of a significant collection of historic printing presses and the largest type collection at any educational institution in North America. In addition to all that, at the university, he mentors students about bookmaking. As if maintaining an active studio practice and directing independent press isn't enough, Dan is an award-winning public artist. He was previously commissioned to design large-scale glass murals and a terrazzo floor for Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport. The glass mural was featured in a book about its fabricator, Franz Mahr, in Munich, and it also won an award of merit for art in public places from Valley Forward and a top 100 International Project Award from CodaWorks. And his terrazzo floor at the airport received a Job of the Year award from the National Terrazzo and Mosaic Association. Dan received his BFA and MFA in printmaking from Arizona State University, and his creative research spans 35 years. In addition to all of his studio, university, and public work, he finds time to remain active with professional organizations such as PLAYA, which is a center that supports collaboration between art and science, where he has been an invited resident multiple times and also serves on their advisory board. Dan was selected for the Happy Valley Traffic Interchange project back in 2017, and the construction was just recently completed. These large design team infrastructure projects always take a long time to complete and are very complicated, but this project, hands down, was the most challenging one that I've ever been part of. To start with, it involved a partnership between the City of Phoenix and the Arizona Department of Transportation, so there were many, many layers of bureaucracy to negotiate. Plus, the bridges span a freeway, so safety issues imposed an incredible number of restrictions. As if all that wasn't enough, the team was well into design when the contractor that had been selected abruptly quit. So there was this disruption as the new contractor was brought on board. When we finally got to fabrication, which is the fun part, the site visits to the fabricator of projects, we only got to make one visit to the fabricator's shop before the pandemic locked everything down. So there were more challenges and a bit of a leap of faith with remote fabrication oversight. But through the long grueling process, it remained a real pleasure and an inspiration to work with Dan on the project. Despite the plethora of restrictions, setbacks, and challenges, he was able to stay positive and to maintain a sense of humor, and most importantly, to remain creative while coming up with the beautiful project that he's going to show you today. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Dan.
Barry, thank you so much for the nice overarching introduction. I think it always throws people when I say book artist, small press publisher, printmaker, public artist. It always throws people for a loop because there is kind of a leap in there in process. And I look at this project as this is sort of how they go. Although it was super complicated and lots of layers, as you mentioned. The main contractor dropped out at one point halfway through. We had to juggle from all aspects. But yes, it was a big project, a giant team, and lots of layers. And basically, the location is Happy Valley Road, I-17 North Phoenix. It's at the base of the Sonoran foothills. And yes, I want to thank you, Barry, too, for hanging by me through this project because this was a big project. There were lots of layers. There was a lot of responsibility. And I know this is not the only project that you work on. You have other big projects that you juggle at the same time. So I want to thank you for that. Basically, the team, Stinger Bridge and Iron, Shop Drawings Fabricator, HDR Engineering, FNS Construction, which is the second contractor that came in, which I thought was absolutely wild for one contractor to have stepped out, a new contractor to step in, with all this stuff happening and concrete being poured at the same time. Just kind of a wild construction scene. Serrano Painting, who did all the accents, City of Phoenix Streets Transportation, Stakeholder Community, ADOT, and there are so many other hands behind the scene, all the crafts that I want to thank that were involved with this project and process. So I want to start with one of my favorite quotes. "It is not down in any map, true places never are," from Moby Dick, Herman Melville. This kind of maybe sets the stage for this project. I work with a lot of words, so I can kind of extract some things, map and places. So I want to research this place and provide layers of meaning that will end up in my bridge design. And I'm going to show you a very quick sampling of my studio works because I want to translate my studio works into the bridge design. So there's going to be not an aesthetic leap, but just sort of a transformation of those ideas and processes. So in my print work, I'm very surface oriented. Blank accordion books, top view of the Grand Canyon, gives the coordinates. Another accordion book that's from discarded maps. Another accordion book that's hand painted, and I'm following the waterways with silver leaf pen. So I can think we see a little bit of a theme here. I've been doing a lot of accordion books. This is called Meiotic Sounds, which was created at the PLAYA residency, and it's bat sounds. A piece of glass, experimental glass I made at Derrick Studios several years ago. It's topographics. I'm looking at surfaces, topography. I'm using accordion books as looking at landscape, which will transcend into my bridge design. This is a topographic piece with Rebecca Lawton, who's a scientist, a geologist. This is a recent piece. So the typography is landscape. And this is sort of a crop of the side view. So it's very surface oriented and ecological print. And as Barry mentioned, my work at the Phoenix Airport, also very super intense projects. The glass was created at Franz Mayer of Munich, and was shipped to Phoenix and installed. But I want to extend my aesthetics from this glass now into metal. And at this point, I certainly don't know how that's going to be done. I work in layers, and I want to look at transparency and translucency. I would like to have those qualities in the bridge, but that's a complete unknown at this point in the early part of the project. And then a detail of the glass. The glass is 3/4 of an inch thick. There are two 3H panels, and it has this incredible depth, luminosity, and transparency, and I want to transcribe those ideas. So, summer of 2017, we're just beginning to talk about the project, and our first meeting will be in September, our first giant group meeting. So in between, I'm gonna pack up the Subaru, pack up art supplies and food, and go up to the artist residency, science residency, Summerlake, which is in the Oregon outback, sort of a Great Basin area. So this would be a standard view from the studios in the evening, and you cannot help but be inspired by this landscape. And the same goes for Arizona. We cannot not be inspired by our landscape. So diving into studio works, these are very quick pieces. Watercolor washes, and I call them dotted landscapes. The dots are actually sort of relief rubbings from trees. Kind of gives that sort of layered appearance. And I'm working with layers and transparencies, sort of a wash on Mylar with typewriter. And then I get to work on my accordion books, my discarded maps. And a finished one. So I do a lot of pushing and pulling on the maps. I'll scratch into the surfaces. I'll push charcoal into them. And all the while in the studio, what I did before I left, because Barry and I really didn't have much information to go on, very few plans for us to study. But what I did was, at the residency, they have satellite internet, which simply means when the satellite goes over, you have internet. So you might as well not bother. But what I did was I did a lot of Google Earth shots from Phoenix before I departed and did printouts. So I'm looking at the lay of the land of the area while I'm working on my studio works. And in the foreground I was about 2 or 3 weeks off of the major lunar eclipse, which I had to return home. So I decided to make my own lunar eclipses that actually spin. So I can sort of study the area long distance. So top view, Google Earth, the top bridge was the old bridge. This will be the Diverging Diamond. This will be another bridge as well. The area is very rich. There are petroglyphs on this mound here. Lots of lava rock and lava cones, very rich in sort of the geological time zone. So I can kind of zoom in some pics with Google Earth on my Xerox printouts. And then kind of get an idea of what a bridge looks like. You know, what does an ADOTCH bridge look like in basic structure? I learned a lot of things on this project, supporting piers, Jersey barrier, anything that has to do with the bridge has to do with safety fences. And all the while I'm working in the studio, while I'm working long distance, I'm working in this environment that's actually sort of similar to Arizona in the sort of high desert and the Oregon outback. So I start making word lists, descriptors of, it could be Oregon, but relating to here. And so I continue to make word lists, and they're pretty automatic. And if they go from day to day, they repeat. And so what happens is I have kind of a top 10 list now. If I kind of shift and filter down, Vista, Filigree, Tracery, Cairn, Tonal Range, Fluoron, Mosaic, Whirl, Vast, Cycle, Fractals, Marker, Color Field. Descriptors that are going to somehow end up in my bridge design, but this is so far removed at the time as far as meetings and process. I really don't know where it's going at this point, but I have kind of a word map, mind map of what might take place. And also at the same time, I'm playing with prototypes in book form. So this is a double accordion book with a reverse fold. It has some of that layering, translucency, and transparency to it. Somehow I want this to be in my design, but much too early to know what that might be at this time. And also learning lots of things about bridges as far as things being relief into bridge. It's like 3 or 4 inches that can be relief in, or 3 or 4 inches relief out. Things are not sticking out or pokey in a way. My ideas will become kind of Byzantine-ish because later I'll find out with sort of ADOT standards, they have like a 3-inch square pole or a 4-inch by 3-inch pole. This is where my whole design is going to land. And so it's definitely going to be a challenge. So in this basic drawing here, the background or the foreground leans back, the foreground leads forward, back and forth in this very sort of tight, compressed plane. And that's where my design will land. Also, at the same time, I'm doing kind of side things, which I'd like to end up in the bridge. I call these fractal drawings. So fractals are really kind of geometric. It could be a snowflake or tree branches. My fractals are kind of chaotic, and they are sort of foreground, background, top view, all at the same time. It's a little of everything. I want this in my bridge too. And how I start these is just taking pieces of paper, crumple them, and then I follow contours, and I go pretty automatic with them as far as making landscapes. I'm also thinking about the geology of the area, the volcanics, how the land lays from layers and vistas, and the edge of the Sonoran Desert. And then those are transcribed into sort of these quick charcoal drawings. And I want this all in my design as well. And I'm also thinking of the area as marker. It's a geological marker, or there are cultural markers in this region. So I want this in my design as well. And at the studios, it is really out back and wild. And so this was a visit one day. I'm not sure what kind of bird it is, but it does look sort of like a raptor in some style. So you're very, very close to nature. So the residency gave me lots of sort of thinking time about my current studio work, and also kind of time to think about what the bridge might be with my word maps. So returning back home now to Phoenix, and we start to begin our meetings, and very simple information that we're presented with. So there'll be 2 new bridges in North Phoenix, Pinnacle Peak, and it's called a tight diamond interchange. And then we have a diverging diamond interchange, which is eventually where my work will end up. There'll be actually 2 bridges here, so it's a little deceptive. So we start to get the lay of the land of the basic layout of the bridge. We do site visits to the old bridge, and we look at potential areas with our whole design team, with Barry and streets and the general contractors and ADOT. And we look at areas that would be optimum for public art. We look at kind of interior areas here and here. There's an interior area here that's possible for public art. We come away from this thinking that's actually not the most optimum area for the work. It's not the most visible area. And so we come up with the plan to actually have artistic fences, aesthetic fences on the face side of each bridge. And originally fences are not there because this is traffic. Pedestrian is all inside and protected. So we don't need, in essence, sort of a variance from ADOT, but basically this is our idea. We need infrastructure in design. Posts need to be embedded in the concrete so that we can build the fence. So we do get the okay for that. We study basic plans. This is what a standard ADOT fence looks like. It's basically a grid, and it's built for safety. And looking at this, thinking, yep, I mean, I could do like some kind of attachment thing I think could work, but I want to push my ideas and I want to push my process in collaboration with my team. And then basic diagrams of sort of a placeholder of what the bridge might look like in X panels. It notes 18 panels, 6 wide, X long. And actually, when the finished design comes about, there are 20 panels left and right, so that that evolves with design. So I get busy with conceptual designs on some of my ideas for integrating sort of the landscape and the sky up from above and atmosphere. So I do these very quick sort of charcoal drawings with light and sky, kind of based on my fractal drawings, but very loose and open. And then very simple things that have to happen along the way for presentations is with PowerPoint info, you know, taking images of that content and then giving it a little punch for PowerPoint. So I'm using the S-curve, but also my lines have S-curves. And I want that in my design because those lines are very smooth and calming. And then something that I realized early on, once I was notified I received the bridge project, is that if you're driving under a bridge and there's one fence, and if there's another fence behind it, it makes a third pattern, and that's called moire. And so I want this in my design. And so I make basic mock-ups with small screens. Things that I have to create to show my team to get them more toward concrete. So this has my transparency, my translucency, my overlaps, my layers, my light shafts, and then what it might look like in a basic plan. And also for a public presentation, I need something hard and physical to share with the public of my basic idea of these layers of screen. And what I'm going to arrive to is 3 layers of screen with face accents. So on this 4-inch pole, this is what I call sort of engineering magic. I'm working with the team is how these things or elements are going to come together in layers, which I think was really amazing in working with HCR engineering. But you can begin to see the sort of transparency and translucency of 1 layer, 2 layers, 3 layers. And I'm imagining what this would look like in a bridge if you're driving, if you just glanced in one point and saw something, but maybe glanced at another point, you would see something different because of the moire action. And I have to put this to further test for my team. So I pick up screen from a sheet metal yard, a basic diamond mesh, 1 layer, 2 layers, 3 layers, and then go out toward Papago Park to see what it looks like in the environment. And to see what it looks like in layers. And so for some of the meetings, I'd haul in a box of screens and we'd hold them up to show the team, what this might look like. Sort of transcribing my conceptual ideas to engineers so that we can get to engineering drawings. And I decided to be very simple with my color palette for the project because I'm looking at metal as sort of the receptor for light, light and shadow. And so my accent colors are going to be in the violet range and blue range, and they're going to be just sort of a light color field. And then samples that are required for presentations. So I'm picking colors out of the Sherwin-Williams color palette, and then we're having samples made. This one, light violet sample, is going to end up in this design, but that one I asked pull some white out, so we get more color in it. And so those are some color shifts that happen. There's some things that are on the peripheral that I think of in this bridge construction. These are very sort of mechanical things that hold the building together, but I wouldn't mind if there was an attachment or kind of a nut bolt system that actually becomes aesthetic. And so early in the project, there are questions. So what does this diamond look like? So I do a little Illustrator work. An early idea was to break crease the diamond so it had kind of facets to it, and then a 4-bolt pattern. In the end, this would all go away. It's attached from the back, which is okay. I mean, that's how it needs to be built. And then questions on the sort of the light bars that are going to collect light with sunlight. Questions like, Dan, what does this look like? Well, it looks like this in Illustrator. And then from here, it goes to engineering. So I'm building up my vocabulary to my team of ideas of this layering the landscape and the sky and atmosphere together, which I always thought at certain points sounds very simple, but it's not. How to do this on this horizontal plane on a 4-inch pole. So there has to be some leaps in the project, and this is the leap, kind of getting out of my conceptual drawings, discussing this with my whole team. So I start to fine tune these contours and with just basically Sharpie and thinking about fence panels. So this would be scanned into the computer. Let's see, I'm getting a pop-up here. Okay, so there's a leap in process from conceptualizing what I'm doing with small samples. Now we're in Illustrator, and these are eventually going to be engineered. So this is the background layer. I've basically dissected like my pastel drawing, which is 10 inches by 24 inches, and I've dissected it in layers from background to foreground. That's how this is going to evolve. So background, middle ground, foreground with cutouts, and I call these accents, which is going to be on the face side. And then a combination of what it's going to look like in Illustrator with the layers. And it gets a little bit unwieldy here in presentations. To design a whole bridge across, it's difficult to see in Illustrator. But our team typically works with like 11 by 17 documents for sending back and forth. So it's a little more easier and visual to look at of a section. So this is a 4-panel section linked together of the flow. And then an overarching view of the design. So at this point, I'm feeling pretty good about this layering idea in the environment. So we have background, middle ground, foreground, face side, and then a crop section. So basically still in the design stage, and it's going to be going toward engineering shortly after that. And so also carrying the design over into the base of the freeway, which is the pier design. And now we have artistic fences here on this face side, opposite face side. We have traffic going both ways. Interior is protected for pedestrians. And then an overarching view of architectural rendering of what it may look like. And then discussing my design with the engineers, lots of content flying back and forth. So they've dissected my contour lines in Illustrator going into CAD drawings. And so these are like, these plans are like cross-checking, cut line, no cut line. They're saying, asking Dan, is this what you mean? Yep, looks good. Exactly the layers that I'm thinking of. Barry had contacted me at one point as we're going into the engineering drawings and shop drawings. So this is one of them. And so not that my design was basic or simple, but there's four layers, 3 screen layers. There's attachments for accents. My design became 348 pages of shop drawings. And there's a lot of reasons to that. One is the bridge is on about a 6-inch or 6-degree arc. So the fence has to be stair-stepped up to meet that arc. Everything has to stay constant and connect between each of these top sections. There are some repeat patterns on both bridges. So those are sort of fabricated duped patterns, but there are a lot of unique patterns because of this, I guess, degree of difficulty. Another view, and so this gives you an idea of the layering and the mechanics of it as far as how this thing's put together on this narrow pole. So it's going to be a screen on the inside that's attached, and nothing can stick out because that's the driving side. It's actually very smooth. And then there's a screen on the middle. There's a screen on the face. There's attachments on the front. I just think this is magical engineering with the team. Having my kind of conceptual vision come through and having it being realized at this point. I mean, all these points are very exciting. So we do get our one shop visit, Barry and I and the whole team at Stinger Bridge and Iron outside of Casa Grande. And so this is the first view of the one screen, which is 10 feet by 24 feet. Now it's getting even more exciting. So we're inside looking out, and it's all working. It has my layers, my transparency, my translucency. It has nice flowing lines. It'll cast a nice shadow a certain time of year, low light in the winter. And at this point, these are some close-up detail shots that you would never get close to, but I think they're marvelous as far as the craft that went into the project in the layering. And then the meshes coming together at close view. And this was simply by chance that this happened. I asked if we were on the inside, if they could turn the bridge around toward the face side so we can get a different view of it. So I just happened to be at this point taking a video. And I think that's just all magical. By there. Face side, there's going to be some color adjustments from earlier color versions. Now we're taking other big leaps. Now we're into installation. So this is the first panel being installed. So this is where the infrastructure had to be considered, as there was going to be no fence on this side before. So there's posts that are embedded. Now they're being welded in place. And then taking another giant leap, there's actually hand-finished work going on here, taking off protective paper on the accents. Now getting the sort of the first picture, first view of the whole bridge coming together. And it's all working as far as all those ideas, all those word lists, mind map, contours, charcoal drawings into engineering, all the layering, transparency and translucency that blends with the sky, and a morning shot. So it's going to look different at different times of day. Interior side, nighttime, and towards sunset, which is very classic Arizona. Everything is happening here that I had sort of conceptualized along the way, all the parts, pieces, and bits, the transparency, the translucency, the S-curves, the flowing lines, how it merges sort of landscape and sky and atmosphere into this plane, which is very tight, sort of the Byzantine-ish plane. And that concludes my talk. Thank you for tuning in. I hope that gives you a little snapshot of how the bridge was conceptualized, how it was engineered, constructed. And as Barry mentioned, this was a pretty intense project, keeping us both on our toes at all points. So with that, thank you very much. And thanks for everyone for tuning in.
Dan, thanks so much for doing that really thorough sort of account of how you think through your designs. As Katie mentioned, excuse me, earlier in the chat, if you have questions, by all means, shoot them into the chat and we can raise them. And if you have lengthy questions, we can unmute you. We have this great power, and you can ask them with your own voice. Any other thoughts, Katie, on that?
No, I don't have any questions in the chat box, so I'm going to allow you to unmute yourselves. If you'd like to ask a question, if it starts to get a little crazy and people talking over each other and we can't hear, then we'll figure out another system. But you should be able to unmute yourself and ask questions now.
Praise is always welcome. So, you know, if you're, feel free.
Thank you, Dan, for sharing your process. It was to hear the connection from the studio work to the words to the time you spent in your residency program and how it all just built to create this layered concept, literally and conceptually, is really lovely.
Yeah, I think with you know, sort of my basic process. I'm a visual artist. I work with visuals. I work with text. So it's kind of this thing that flips back and forth, and so it's pretty constant. You know, what may sort of arrive at the forefront, because words make pictures and pictures make words, and you know, that in combination, you begin to get the layering of meaning.
Well, I can ask sort of maybe a simple question in a way. I know you studied at ASU and for both bachelor's and master's, but in going through those programs, did you imagine your work living in this kind of realm?
Actually, sort of not ever. I mean, you're very Gordon went through the program as well, MFA in printmaking, and you're so focused on your work, you're so focused on a process. It's all sort of eye-hand coordination, bookmaking, printmaking, precision. It can be loose at the same time. Projects take a long time. You know, I switched to doing sort of more automatic work over the years, like the quicker accordion books, because I'm not on press editioning and things will take you know, a couple years. So the access was different, but printmaking is collaborative. You know, it can be a sole effort. If you're a book artist, you can be just like Gordon and Gerald and Linda. It can be a sole effort that you're designing. You may be writing, you may be illustrating, you may be printing, and binding it all. So you're doing everything, but it can be collaborative if you're collaborating with a writer. So it's that part is really open-ended as far as process. But yeah, to get back to your question, I did a project in I've done a lot of community-based workshops and things, so those are kind of different outreach. But the Terrazzo project and the glass project is like how to sort of transcribe your ideas into this other realm with different materials that you've never worked with, and some very research based. So say for Terrazzo, for example, I researched Terrazzo. Terrazzo comes from the Romans and it comes from the sculptors, and they chipped marble, and they took the marble and they put it together with a lime mixture, then they ground it with the stone, and that's traditional terrazzo versus modern terrazzo, which is epoxy resin. Same for the glass, had to research glass. Same for the bridge, had to research. I looked at top 10 bridges around the world, looking at design, but there's definitely a leap, and it's doable.
Is the nature of the collaboration any different with these wide-ranging trades that perhaps you know nothing about?
I think you have to, with the trades that are involved with each of the projects, those are the experts. So as an artist coming to the process, I don't need to know everything, but I'm certainly inquisitive. The more I know about a project or a process, I think the better I can push myself and push my ideas into those new realms. So you rely on basically your team to collaborate, and also communicate with your team to realize your ideas.
So, in talking about this project, we sort of glanced off the obstacles along the way, but I know that this project had some really start, stop moments, as all public projects do. But, what were the most, I guess, frustrating parts of this whole effort? I mean, coming from the studio and past public projects and trying to translate into this scale with these different trades?
Yeah, I think essentially it goes maybe takes a step back to the terrazzo and the glass, where I scaled up. There were kind of stumbling blocks, and how to do that with the studio work, and the same went for this project, how to scale up. But I began very sort of analog, localized at sort of the hand level to scale up. There were certainly learning that the general contractor had left halfway through the project was like, what does that do to our part? Our part is part of the whole project. We're integrated. What's happening there? Kind of a lot of unknowns. the steel tariffs that happened partway through our project. I was at a public art network conference in Denver a couple summers ago, kind of in between our project, and one of the fabricators spoke up during the one of the panels and said, when you go to bed at night, the price of steel is one price. When you come up in the morning, it's a different price. The fabricators cannot figure out how to estimate a project. And COVID had a lot to do, also impacted our project as well. It kind of, not that it stopped us cold in our tracks, but how to facilitate the whole thing with Barry and my team and the fabricators. There were, felt like a lot of times a lot of unknowns in the process.
And that seems to be the nature of this work at times. I just want to thank Barry Sparkman at this point. I mean, Barry was the project manager on this and had to guide it through all of these obstacles. And as I think Dan has mentioned, there's nothing about this that's a solo act, but there's also some pretty friendly ghosts in the machine. And I think on our end, Barry was that ghost, making sure that this project made it to completion. So just want to give you the credit that you're due. I know how complicated this was, and I hope it helped you, Dan, along the way.
Yeah, well, I think really one of the key elements of this type of project is your program manager. It's like, you're my boss, Barry, and I know that you don't tell me everything, but is probably good. You know, what's happening on the other end and the other layers. But we managed to keep kind of good faith through the project and process. And also, I think another point is that when you're working on a project like this, you have to trust the process, even though you are maybe going blindly through it, because you're sort of entering in one area and coming out another, and you don't know what that path is. You can't predict what the next steps are. When someone wants something at 3 a.m. in the morning for a diagram, or and then you're just on it.
Thank you. Any other questions for the good of the cause here?
I see Gerald talking, maybe.
Yeah, I would just like to make a comment, not necessarily a question, but Dan, your work has always amazed. I mean, you are a true visual artist. You've worked with so many different mediums to be able to, create whatever, the vision may start out to be and then ends up being. And your I guess, demeanor, right? And just your openness to collaboration and the process, not only your process, but the process of the whole, is, brings about a successful outcome.
Yeah, I think to kind of dovetail on that, it's my printmaking's collaborative, and I direct the Pyracantha Press in the School of Art, and it's collaborative. So I look at my collaborations starting from scratch, and so that's kind of like our bridge project is starting from scratch. We don't know where it's going, but in that role, I'm like artist facilitator, some facilitating ideas. And then you get into these other roles in a project like this where I'm the artist, but I also feel that I can facilitate ideas and how we have to communicate to the team to realize something as far as the end game.
That's really fabulous, Dan. What's next?
What's the well,
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you're really appreciative that you have one of these. You feel very honored. It's super competitive, these projects. There's a listserv called the Public Art Network, and there are always questions being put out on it. And one was, so out of 100 projects, how many do you get? And it's like, some artists never get one. So I feel very fortunate to have had 1, 2, 3 gateway sort of transportation projects. Feel really honored.
Well, having worked with you for several years, for many years, you bring a lot in that regard. It's a pleasure to work with you. So.
Yeah, you as well. I mean, we learn from each other's what we do.
Oh. Good job, Dan.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. Unless there are any other thoughts, I'd like to turn it over to Katie Byaris, who's a round of applause for Katie. She's been helping to pull this entire workshop series together since August, starting with the Public Art 101s. And I would say if you're interested in trying to figure out how to make the leap that Dan has made, there's a lot of great video online available about making those steps. And Katie's just posted some of that information. But Katie, you want to talk about maybe what might be coming up in our world of workshops before we take our summer break?
Yep. So I did just pop the YouTube link into the chat box. That's where you'll find our previous workshops. There are currently 5 different series of workshops there. And then I will be posting these series of workshops from April. This month, we have decided to focus on artists like Dan who have completed projects in 2020. So last week, we had a talk with artist Bobby Zokaitis, who just recently completed a project with us. And previous to that, we had one with Jody Pinto. Those will be posted soon. Next week, we have our final artist talk coming up with Laura Haddad and Tom Drogan, who recently completed a public art piece for us up at 107th Avenue, up on the very northwest side of the city. So it's been really fun to hear about everyone's different processes and dealing with the challenges of completing projects during COVID and 2020 and everything that it brought along. So we'd love it if you could join us next week. You can sign up on Eventbrite the same way you did for today. And then I think we're going to be taking a little break from workshops for a while, and then we'll probably come back in the fall with something even more different.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Barry. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah,
And
thanks
thank
for-
you all for
Great to see
joining us
everyone.
today.
Thank you for all tuning in.
We bid you a happy Thursday and a good weekend when it arrives. Stay cool if that's relevant, or stay warm if that's relevant. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Take
you.
care,
Bye.
Dan.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Fun.
Fun.